him getting to that point where it should hit or it's not going to hit, and wham, not hit. And then just another one, not hit.
8 hours of that can make a person insane, right? I would imagine.
They're so hard to pull out, and they're like $2 a screw, so you kind of feel like you should be.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our regular discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Ian Schwant, Production Manager for TDS Custom Construction.
Hello, everyone.
Green Building Advisor, Senior Editor Kylie Jacques.
Hello.
And our long-term producer, Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please email your questions to Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, thanks for being on the show, y'all.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
How's it been? It's like suddenly seems like almost winter around here. I don't know.
Yeah. You've got your Taunton hat on. I love that.
I need it in my office in the mornings because I turn it down to like 60 at night, but then I'm cold in the morning. Ian, what's the temperature in Wisconsin?
We're still riding highs in the 70s.
Really?
Wow.
That's crazy.
Unseasonably warm. It's about to crash back down into the 60s and 50s, but it's been pretty sweet here.
Jeff and I were talking.
Unseasonably warm is not always like, I'm not comforted by that.
Yeah. We are supposed to have a pretty nasty winter by all accounts of different things I read.
And when you say nasty, you mean snow.
Snow and cold, yeah. It's supposed to be
so that's not nasty to everybody.
And unseasonably wet.
Well,
okay. So, how are folks predicting a winter's weather now?
Who knows? You don't read the Farmer's
But you believe
Almanac.
it.
Oh, the Farmer's Almanac. I used to work on that publication. That's what you want to read if you really want to know what's going on with the weather. That is.
Are you kidding me? Do you believe that?
Yes. Are you kidding me? The editors that work on that publication spend gobs of time on that stuff. And this is like science. They spend science-heavy time on putting that publication together.
Wow. I'm curious, what is the science there?
Oh, they converse with, I remember being in meetings with, what is it? NOAA or the
National Oceanographic Administration.
Like we had consultations with them. I'm not kidding. That the old Farmer's Almanac has been around for a long. I'm going to give it a plug. It's been around for almost, or maybe over 200 years at this point, because they take that stuff seriously. They do a lot of research to get that data. I believe it. Hands down.
Wow. Okay. Well, interestingly, you were not my first colleagues who has worked on that title, so I find that very interesting.
Oh, okay. Well, let's talk.
Jeff, do you think that's real?
I certainly know that, there's enough. I don't know what's going on in the Farmer's Almanac, but there's enough research with NOAA and NASA and things like that looking at major shifts in jet streams and ocean currents and things like that they can get some general ideas that are pretty accurate.
Ian, you buy it?
Yeah, they're the ones that were saying we're going to have the hard jet stream coming straight south out of Canada into most of the upper Midwest, which is going to keep us very cold. And I can't remember what weather phenomenon they were talking about that's going to bring us more snow than normal. But another one that lines up with that jet stream.
At the risk of giving too much away, it's November 3rd. So at the end of winter, we're going to have a follow-up conversation to see if this was indeed true, because I'm very curious.
I'll get the yardstick out for my snow pile.
There's also a distinction to be made between there's the Farmer's Almanac and there's the old Farmer's Almanac. And those are two different publications. And the old Farmer's Almanac is what you want to be consulting.
Okay. This is fantastic. So, Jeff, speaking of monitoring things, you took the plunge to monitor your indoor air quality. What did you buy, and
cool.
what have you found?
Well, I got a, well, actually, I have two now because I started out with, I got an AirThings, crap, I can't think of the name of it, Mini, which kind of just does some basic stuff. But then I got the View Plus, which is like their top of the line one. So it does radon and carbon dioxide and a bunch of stuff. So just got that. So I don't really have, any hard data yet, but.
Have you observed a VOC rises when you crack open your whiskey?
I have been surprised at how dynamic VOCs are. And for apparent, like in the middle of the night, it's like, what's going on in the middle of the night?
Heavy breathing.
I guess.
Were you ripped when you went to sleep?
Yeah.
No, my guess is it's from the garage, right? Because I would think convection would change, at night, right?
Yeah, it's
idea.
just odd. It was like around midnight. It seems like it goes way up.
That's so interesting. What's the cat doing?
We have no cat. We have no animals.
I'm thinking of I'm thinking of skip that. You're talking VOCs. I'm tthinking carbon monoxide. So.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure Jeff's monitor is checking for that too. Am I right?
Well, actually, no. I've got just a regular carbon monoxide detector. But carbon dioxide was kind of one of the main things I was curious about because, since we've determined that my house is reasonably tight, and it's kind of on the cusp of we should probably have some outside air coming in, and yesterday I was up over 1,000 parts per million on carbon dioxide, which is high. And then I opened.
And we should say your house is big. It's got a lot of volume.
Yeah.
Which surprises me that it would get that high given its size.
Yeah.
Right.
And since it was a nice warm day yesterday, I had all the doors open and it was down to 500. But now,
could you discern a difference? I mean, like in your outlook or productivity?
Well, it's hard to tell during the course of a day because, it's like
it goes up and down anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Logie in the morning, and then after 4 cups of coffee, I'm much perkier.
I had a scare.
Go ahead, Kylie.
Oh, I'll just do the editor share. I had a scary situation the other day. I have a wood burning stove, and it's best, of course, with each new season to get rid of the old ashes and clean it, get your stove ready for a new season. And I was just cold and anxious to get my first fire going. I know the chimney is clean. The flue was open, but I was about an hour into burning a fire, my first of the season, with too much ash. And I have a question here. Lots of ash. I would say maybe like 3 or 4 inches of ash. And I think now I live in a tiny house and it's leaky, but all the windows were closed. And like I said, it's small. So anyway, I think that the carbon monoxide got very high because I started to feel, let's just say I wound up laying out on my deck feeling very sick after an hour of the fire. And I'm glad I had the wherewithal. I felt so strange. It was a very different feeling from anything I've ever felt before. So it dawned on me, because I know a little about this, that maybe that's what was going on and I should get out of the house. So just curious to know if, say, a dirty or full up stove is a contributing factor to carbon monoxide buildup.
I would think incomplete combustion, right? So if you're having poor combustion owing to the fact that the bottom of the firebox is filled with ash, absolutely.
Okay.
But as I recall, you burn your fire with the door open. Am I right?
Not always. Only it depends.
Okay,
It
well, so did
depends.
you have the door open or
No,
closed?
not that day. That day,
Yeah.
I was very cold and I shut it all up and I did that. And
Was it
lesson learned.
smoky in there?
It wasn't smoky. And it didn't, of course, didn't have a smell, but something was not right. Like my body told me that. So it's, that's scary stuff. I've had friends experience things that are like, carbon monoxide is very scary because it sneaks up on you. You don't realize, like, thankfully I realized like something's not right. I need to get out of the house,
Yeah. And what's interesting to me, this very sad story happened in the University of Vermont where some students were killed in student housing when the vent for the boiler backfired and popped apart with this stuff that's plastic, Plex vent, and had been recalled, but it was still in this building. But the couple of the kids went to the ER, and of course they got better once they were out of the building. And so it was tough to diagnose what was going on when they showed up at, it wasn't the ER, it was like student health services. But then they went back to the building and several of them died. It was terrible. Yeah. So
you mean they got out and then they went back and then they...
Because no one knew that the building was having
Awful.
combustion problems. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's real serious.
It is serious. And
yeah.
a lot of people don't understand it and know about it.
Gosh, you should at least have a CO detector, right? To make sure you're not poisoning yourself if you have some kind of weird situation with your combustion appliances.
And make sure that your batteries are charged, which is my bad. But that's what you need to do. Keep on it.
So I think it's daylight savings time when the time changes that folks tell you to change your smoke detector and CO detector batteries every year, and it's easy to remember that way. Yeah.
I like that.
And it's just before
Until we stop doing that.
Don't say that.
What have you been doing, Ian? Is it busy at work?
Yeah, very busy at work. And then I finally drywalled the rest of my garage and insulated the trusses and ceiling assembly of the garage. That was a big deal last weekend. And then all of our pole barn material is showing up this week. We had the first load of posts and steel show up yesterday, and then the trusses are due any day now.
Awesome. So you're going to bore holes with a tractor-mounted auger and put the posts in and pour concrete around, right?
Concrete, or we might just do crushed stone around the posts.
Cool.
But I was trying to come up with what I should do as far as waterproofing or protection for the post that is in the ground. And we're just doing 6x6 pressure treated, but I know in the past I've had people tell me to put tar on them, or I was actually thinking I have such a good stock of zip tape left over from the house, I could wrap the bottoms of the posts in zip tape.
Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, it's got to help, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Plus, Sarah keeps asking me why we have a case of zip tape laying around when we're not building the house anymore.
That seems like such a great application of leftover material.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not free like your leftover zip tape, but I know there are like these little bitumen socks you can put on the end of a post, right?
Bitumen socks. That's cool.
I don't know what they're called. Post saver, I think, is one. Yeah. They're great for winter weather, too.
I've done projects with oak and locust posts where we charred and tarred the bottoms. So you hit them with the torch and char the wood and then tar over it. It's kind of a weird process the first time I did it, but
what about
another
using
way to protect the bottom.
What about using liquid applied flashing? Would that be something?
Oh, there we go. Even more expensive.
That's pretty fancy. Yeah.
I already have the case of zip tape.
Yeah, exactly.
That's probably what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, that does sound like a little bit labor intensive, though.
Probably, because the posts are going to be pretty heavy. They're 20-foot posts on the sides and then 24-foot ones on the ends.
And how many of them?
Well, they're going to be lying down when they're delivered, so I mean, you could slide them off, the end
it's just
off
a lot
the stack.
of cutting. How many footings are there?
There are 9 posts on
that's not too
each
bad.
side, and then the side without a door has 3 additional. The side with a door has 2. So fair amount.
Yeah.
Are you psyched or are you dreading all this
I'm
work?
really, I'm excited.
I bet.
Really been slaving away on the house the last couple of weekends, and it's been nice. I got on a pretty good roll with knocking some projects off the list.
Is Sarah in the greenhouse?
She has been working on digging her dahlia tubers out and cleaning up those and organizing them and seeing which ones survived and duplicated properly and cleaning them. So that's what she's been on.
Anyone who's a
Dustin.
gardener knows that, like, next to planting in the spring, fall is like definitely the most labor intensive. Right,
Yeah.
Kylie? Yeah.
Yes, and the best. It's fun. I love it.
Yeah, my next thing is to get the John Deere 955 out with our tiller and till the entire garden field.
Will you plant a cover crop?
We were thinking about it. I don't know if we still will or if we'll just till it
Mulch
up
it.
a couple of times and mulch it. Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe there's so much going on. It's great to talk to you all. It makes me feel kind of lame about my projects, of which I am just in the
please.
planning stage.
What do you got going?
Nothing. I mean, I'm thinking of replacing windows in my house because I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense. But
Well, what do you have right now?
I have, what are they called? Silver Line by Anderson, which is like the cheapest builder grade vinyl double hung window you can get. And they perform terribly. I don't know. They get a lot of condensation on them because the glass is cold. They feel cold to sit next to. They don't block sound all that well because they're not very airtight. So I feel the need to spend tens of thousands of dollars on new windows and hours of my time replacing them instead.
Are you
Well,
going to get any sweet government money for replacing the windows?
I don't know if that counts, and that would be awesome if it did.
Patrick, this is one of those questions like your wall assemblies, are they such that warrants high performance windows? Because
No.
there's, okay.
So I'm
You might do it
thinking
anyway.
of 400 series, which
I got it,
is,
yeah.
very middle of the road window, but
We were
they'll
talking
be,
about that,
200% better than what I got, I'm sure.
Yeah, we were talking about those windows a couple of episodes ago.
Speaking of windows, we heard from Eric from Boston. He says, "Hi, Patrick and Co. I'm writing regarding your conversation with Kylie and Mike in episode 505 about European-style tilt-turn windows. My wife and I recently had them installed in a newly renovated portion of a second home we purchased in 2020 in Western Massachusetts. I would describe them as quirky, to say the least. The manufacturer we went with, Daco, a Polish company, made the UPVC triple glazed units, and we have a set of picture windows with operable casement style tilt turn units that open to the interior and 2 large slider doors that are known as tilt slide. You mentioned the issue of opening the casements inward rather than outward. Well, I hadn't really thought about that when we ordered the units, and we most definitely have issues with them and the furniture that is up against the window and window wall near a small table and above the couch. For the couch unit, we can at least tilt in the window from the top for fresh air while we simply move the chairs out of the way, open the window, and put the chair back in its place. All slightly annoying. For the tilt slide door units, the main concern is leaving enough space in front of them to allow the unit to open, as the mechanism requires the door to first open into the room about 4 inches before it can slide to the side. The other thing about the slider units is they don't come with any outside handles, which the window supplier told me when we ordered them, but had forgotten about by the time they arrived. You can still pull the units mostly closed from the outside by the door, but there is no handle to latch. Does that make any sense? Is this
No.
normal, Ian? This makes no sense to me.
No sense
No,
at all.
seems really weird. Yeah.
Do people in Europe go outside and then come immediately back in? Do they ever close the door behind them? Do they go to work? I don't understand.
They
Do they
do
not
things
have cats that
differently.
are going to run away?
Yeah. It's strange.
Yeah, the units lead out to a deck, and mostly when they are open, the screen is in place, so it's not really a big deal. Other than those small annoyances, the window/door performance and airtight design make them very comfortable to sit directly next to on the coldest winter day. Would I recommend them? Probably due to their efficiency. The entire window package, including the front door, 2 picture units, 2 sliders, 2 triangle units with screens, and inside blinds, was $14,000. That doesn't seem bad to me.
I was going to say, I like when people provide numbers and quantities of what they got, you know?
Me too.
Yeah, it's helpful information.
Oh my gosh, everything has a budget, right?
Right. And I agree, Patrick, that seems like fairly reasonable.
Yeah.
For windows, which are crazy expensive.
He goes on with a couple of other stuff describing the house, but it's had its share of remodels and additions, and suffice to say, it's 200 years old, so it's got some quirks. He says, my window research began in 2020 with Fine Homebuilding print issue dedicated to windows and glazing, and I joined All Access last spring before building the deck. I really appreciate the community that you guys have created and the knowledge and level of passion that you all bring to the conversation. Cheers, Eric from Boston. Eric, that is really nice. Thanks. The community is you all, right?
Yeah.
Ian, you must have had clients with tilt-turn Euro-style windows. What do they think? Do you ever get any feedback?
We have not. I've toured a couple of projects where they had them, and the first thing I always think of is you can't put anything in front of the window now.
Same here. And
it's like a plant or a couch or anything.
That's weird, right?
Ian, I don't know. I was with Ben Bogey when I was first introduced to them in person, and I found them weird to operate. I don't know if I just couldn't get my head around how to open this thing, and of course, if you're living with it, you figure it out. But upon, like the first introduction, it's not intuitive,
No.
At least in this case.
No, not when you're used to just unlatching a double hung and lifting it up, or unlatching a casement and cranking it out.
Right.
Those seem very intuitive to us. The whole idea of it can tilt in, it can turn in, seems like a lot.
Yeah, they're not user friendly.
I can tell you when I sold windows and doors, I would always suggest casements for new construction. I was like, they're way more airtight. You have uninterrupted glazing to look out, right?
Yeah, I like casements.
And nobody ever wanted them. They all wanted double hungs because that's what's normal in New England. And the builders would say, well, I want double hungs because even when they're broken, you can open them.
That is true.
Which is somewhat true.
The best piece of advice that I got while designing my house was do casements and do as few operables as you think you need. Really think about what windows you need to open, because for one, fixed windows are cheaper, and you get the better air seal out of a fixed window than an operable.
That's really smart. Here's my little casement. I have 2 casement windows that I love very much. There's one, and like you said, Patrick, I mean, the seal is just so nice. And there's concern, of course, with casements that they get exposed to the elements when they're open, if they open to the exterior, which is the case for me. But I have a nice deep overhang. And yes, there's moisture, but it's not bulk water. I don't worry about it,
Yeah, and at least the Anderson products, and I'm sure there are others, that sash is wrapped in vinyl. It is welded together. If it gets wet, it doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or mine, which are the fiberglass from Marvin.
You have Ultrex, I believe is what they call their...
Yeah, the essentials when I got them,
We also heard from John. I listened to podcast 501 again and have some more thoughts about OSB losing its strength from re-roofing. Well, for those of you who don't remember, John wrote in asking, if you re-roof 4, 5, 6 times, what is that doing to the OSB sheathing? Which, because his observation when he had a new roof, is he had tons of wood chips in his attic from the nails popping through. And we said, with Mike Gerton, as you might imagine, did some math to determine how many holes and their how much they affect the panel. John thought about it some more and he wrote back, I'm not sure I agree with the math about nailing. The reason is that the math assumes a random distribution of nails in the OSB. That's not the case, as shingles have a specific nailing pattern and layout. It's likely that nails from subsequent installations will fall close to the previous layer's nails with a bunch of areas not touched by new nails, rather than a random layout. I'm not sure it is a problem, but I just want to point out a potential problem with your assumptions. You wouldn't be the first, John. I agree to a point, but the layout of the shingles is never going to be exactly the same from roof to roof. Am I right?
Yeah.
Jeff,
I
Ian,
would
Kylie?
think you might have them in the same line off the eave if you're using the same types of architectural style asphalt shingles. You could end up with your lines being in the same place, but as far as where they would be left to right on your roof sheathing,
No way, right?
Quite the accident to have them all line up or be close to each
And
other.
the approved nailing area is at least 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches wide. I mean, it's like if you tried to hit that hole that was there before, or a quarter inch or half, I don't think you could do it.
And
Now, am I right to?
just an eighth of a inch difference in the exposure as it adds up over the length of, the height of the roof is going to move that several inches.
Yeah, I don't buy it. Sorry, John. You can have problems with our other assumptions anytime, but I think this one is pretty sound. He wants to mention, following up on the cost of building in the D.C. suburbs, specifically Montgomery County, there is a lot of money in this area. Think people like Dan Snyder. Who's Dan Snyder?
He owns the football team in Washington.
Okay.
I believe
That's
they're
why we
now
don't know about
Commanders. And actually, as of this week, he's potentially put them up for sale for $5.5 billion.
Wow, NFL teams
Priorities.
have gotten kind of expensive. I guess inflation has affected the value of pro football. But there are
That was
also
the
many
sports portion of the Fine Homebuilding.
I'm out.
I know what I'm good at. It's not
Yeah,
that.
it's not that.
He says, but there are also many more average Joes. I found that in some cases I can actually get better prices here than in some rural areas like Western Pennsylvania, because what is considered commodity items here is unusual in those areas. Those areas have often given up some great innovations, with products from a little town south of where I grew up being featured by Matt Reisinger. That was surprising. I'm guessing it's, what is it? Maryland building products manufacturer. I don't know. The town I grew up in, this county seat, known as a college town and home to a lot of manufacturing. Some big names have left: Owens, Illinois glass plant, other glass plants, the railroad, and Sealy mattresses, and some larger names have held on and sometimes done well. I have many friends who work in factories like Ashland Colony, and the new supporting industries like a fiberboard plant and transportation industries have popped up. One of the gems, I believe, is a business local to where I grew up, Structural Modulars. I used to have a bad opinion of modular homes, but some experiences in the 70s and 80s, there was a time when that term was a killer in real estate listings. I think that's no longer the case. There are semi-custom homes in that they have a lot of basic layouts as a starting point. My in-laws started with a basic design, but their modifications were incorporated with little effort or additional cost. The result was great, of reasonable cost, and has held up well over the years. For something like the Silver Spring project, I think it's a great approach. So we heard from other folks who said, go modular if you want to build more affordably in expensive areas. And I think that probably makes a lot of sense. You're nodding, Kylie?
Yeah, it seems to me from what I've gathered over the years that does seem like an affordable approach if it's carefully executed and thoughtfully done, Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like about it, but I think you got to do your homework and make sure that they're, building them correctly with good air sealing details, because they can be very leaky. The marriage walls where the modules are joined, usually in the center of the building, are often a huge source of air leaks in these homes.
Yeah, right. They're easy to be. They can be crummy if they're not done well. Just a quick side note, I'm wondering about like just affordability and quick construction and airtight envelopes. Do you guys think that the whole 3D concrete printing of houses thing is ever gonna, I know it won't hit the mainstream market, but do you think it's a solution to like quick affordable housing, and would we even want to support that? But it just seems like it's been on the table. I don't know. What do you think?
Somewhere in Patrick's junk email box, he has like a 1,500 word rant that I wrote him after
Okay,
listening
so you've
to
got
his
some
pro
thoughts.
talk with the 3D concrete printing guy.
Oh,
He
I didn't
was
hear that one. Okay.
completely trashing that as an idea for
Yeah.
affordable housing.
What's
Gotcha.
your beef with it, Ian?
Well, for one, it's pretty carbon intensive. Two,
Right.
it's slow and expensive to start your business in. I mean, he was basically trying to sell millions of dollars worth of equipment to people. And furthermore, the exterior of the home is the easy part to build. So all of this work that goes into making the easy part more complex, to me, defeats the purpose.
Do you think it has a place in providing quick shelter for, after some kind of severe weather event where people are displaced and for long periods of time where they're living under tarps? Like, does it make
Sure.
sense there?
It could, but I still think, at least in North America, everything that we've geared ourselves toward as builders is based around wood platform framing. So anything you do to get away from that, you're going to lose all the built up efficiency of generations of people who have done that and executed it for their living.
Yeah, I totally agree. The shell of the building is not the hard part, right? In Habitat, they routinely frame an entire house, in 4 or 5 hours, with a couple dozen people because it's so efficient, and they're hand nailing and,
I never looked at it like that. Okay.
it's pretty hard to argue with the resource and,
Oh, yeah.
construction efficiency of light wood frame construction and the redundancy. I think it's
And it's easy to
pretty
argue
hard to
against the use of concrete.
I think where a lot of work could be done in that space is coming up with standard mechanical wall panels that can have all of your plumbing and electrical in them, and maybe loosening up some of the codes that require the amount of electrical wiring that go into a house. I think would be one way to get around some of the added mechanical costs when you have to have outlets routinely spaced through all of your walls.
Oh my gosh, that would drive me bananas though, because it's so easy to do when the wall is open and being built versus like now I don't have a receptacle and I want to put my lamp here.
Right, but if you're talking about trying to do something modular and quick and inexpensive, you have to sacrifice something somewhere. So you could have those wall panels almost entirely done if you're sacrificing some of those mechanicals to being just in one part of the house, specifically on interior walls.
Is that because the complexity of building those module panels is so much more when you are trying to create cavities for electricals? Is that why?
I think it's more overlap, it's more complexity, and I think there's stuff that you could come up with as far as strapping is concerned to do mechanical chaseways. To me, the holy grail of like panelizing and modular is to be able to build a wall that is virtually complete and then stand it up so it's sided on the outside, already has the windows in, it's already insulated. And I think a lot of the people, specifically over in Europe and some of the hard to reach areas in Great Britain, are doing these types of wall panels and then still doing the mechanical work on site. And that's what's stopping them from being able to complete the interior, but they can complete the exterior of the house in a few hours.
It's something that seems like has a lot of potential, but we just haven't figured out how to make it work with our systems and methods of construction.
Yeah, it's joining the mechanical work and the mechanical needs of the structure to the envelope of the structure in an efficient way. And like what the letter writer says about the modular homes that specifically come in two halves, that's kind of as close as we've come. It's the best we've got right now.
Our first question comes from Marc. Hey, FHB crew, you guys are awesome. A buddy of mine started telling me about how wooden trusses in residential homes are a big risk, and I decided to do my own research. I found the problem he was talking about fairly quickly. If a house catches fire, apparently the gusset plate used to make connections on trusses fail very quickly. The teeth only penetrate the surface of the lumber, and as soon as the heat/charring is applied, the plates fall right off and collapse is inevitable. This article goes into more detail, and it's a link to fireengineering.com. What do you think? Is this a big problem? And if so, why is no one talking about it? I feel like a modified version of the gusset plate using deeper penetrating teeth is a simple fix. Thanks for your time. Respectfully, Marc. Oh boy, who wants to go first?
Not a problem.
Why is it not a problem, Ian?
The house and the fireproof assemblies are only designed to last long enough so that you can get out of the house. I've talked to
and when you put drywall over trusses, you get a lot more time, I think, is the takeaway.
You get 30 minutes with standard drywall and an hour with Type X, but there's nothing about the fire systems that we have that are designed to really save the home. They're designed to give you time to get out. I've had multiple firefighters and fire safety professionals tell me if you want to try and save your house, full sprinkler is really the only option that you have. I've spoken to a lot of different firemen over the years who have told me that when they get to a call and it's a subdivision of newer homes, that they're pretty sure we're built with engineered materials like truss joists in the floor or wood trusses, they will just not go in. If there is not a reason to go in to save a life, they will not go in to save the property, because they've had too many instances of firemen going in, getting up to the second level and having that total floor system burned out below them, but it looks like it's still intact. And there's a lot of stories in websites like the one the writer sent that talk about injuries to firefighters falling through engineered flooring assemblies.
One of Carol's multifamily projects when she was in affordable housing development, they made them indicate on the house numbers that there had roof trusses in the assembly with a little truss icon above the house number. And I'm sure a lot of folks wondered what the heck that meant, but it was totally for the firefighters, so they knew that they were not to go in that building unless there was someone in there that they needed to rescue.
There's a podcast that I've mentioned in the past, 99% Invisible. It's all about the design of the built environment. And that is one of the episodes, is those numbers on the building to indicate to firefighters whether or not they should go in and why. Yeah, that's interesting. I want to jump in here because this Marc might be just interested to look at this document, because I found myself interested, and I don't even really, this is not, it doesn't affect me in one way or the other, but it's out of the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, and it's a study of metal truss plate connectors when exposed to fires. And they ran 12 tests to determine whether the metal plate is protecting the wood beneath or further progressing its degradation. And the tests, so it's all about the heat transfer between the metal and the wood. But what was interesting to me about it was that they tested varying degrees of teeth depth and like how fully embedded the gusset was in the wood. Anyway, it was a fascinating read. It's a very long document.
Well, don't keep us in suspense. Do longer teeth help?
I can't even get to that conclusion. I can't say. I didn't go through every single test, and it's heavy duty science. It's very scientific. So if you're like at that level with interest, I recommend it. But yeah, there's lots of considerations there, and it's just neat. Whenever somebody does tests, it's always fun to look through the results, and but that seems to be a factor.
I would think if you're getting to the point where you're considering a little bit of extra tooth depth on your gusset plate, your house is shot and it's going to get bulldozed anyway, and no firefighter should be going in there to try and put that out and controlling it from the exterior. So it's interesting science, but
Sure.
I see it as kind of a after the fact point.
Kylie, we'll have to put that link to
I will.
On the podcast page.
So if this is all the case, then, or if we accept Ian's arguments, then in wild-prone areas, roof trusses are not a good idea. Is that what we're saying here?
I'd say vented roofs are not a good idea in wildlife-prone areas and other assemblies and like uncontrolled vegetation around the house. I don't think that's the big problem. I think there are other. If the fire gets in the attic, it's a problem no matter what. Kind of what I think. This comes from Dustin. Dustin writes, I live in a 1.5-story cape in climate zone 5, Albany, New York, with the typical issues of knee walls and cathedral ceilings in the upstairs. I need a new roof within 5 years. The roof has 2 valleys and 2 shed dormers on a 22.8 square roof. I recently got a quote for $12,400 for a new roof. I understand the opportunity of adding insulation above the roof deck that re-roofing brings, and I'm exploring those options. I contacted 2 roofers that they were in the GAF shingle brand referral program because I was originally inquiring about a nail-based product from GAF that they have on their website. It consists of foam insulation up to 6 inches thick with ventilation blocks spaced for cross ventilation, then an OSB sheathing layer. Turns out GAF discontinued this product. My question is...
It was brutally expensive.
Was it?
Yeah, a lot of those nail-based products are really, really expensive.
They're designed more for commercial applications, right?
Yeah.
We've always suggested it is a great way to add outsulation to your roof, but it turns out it's not easy to get, and I didn't know it was unusually expensive.
It's more expensive than the sum of its parts, I think, is a good way to think of it.
That's a non-starter, right?
Yeah.
Dustin says, my question is, could a homeowner, in an effort to save money and time, buy used foam boards, apply them in layers over top of existing shingles, tape the seams, put on ventilation channels along screws, and then block off/spray foam the area behind the knee wall to make the old roof unvented? I would then hire a roofing company to put down a layer of decking and a new roof. The savings are doing the insulation work myself and buying used foam. Also, saving labor of stripping the old shingles and saving money of not having the roofing company do it. I see this as a way to do the work myself and never have to worry about going without a weather barrier because there would always be an aging but still fully functional roof at all times before the project is finished. I know this isn't the ideal way to do this, but is it hurting anything? My rafters are 2x6 with board sheathing. Is the layer of old shingles too heavy, or is this no heavier than a solar array or slate roof? My point being that the roof rafters, are they really undersized? What do you think about this over roof retrofit and the load-bearing capacity of my 2x6 rafters? Dun, dun, dun.
Such a good question. I'm so curious about it.
It's a great question.
When people
this is like something we've been saying to do for decades, right?
Got to rip the old shingles off, man. Got to do it.
Why?
Yeah.
For one, it's creating an uneven surface that you're now going to try and build all of the rest of your work off the top of. You don't know if there's been any failures in that you're then just going to paper over with more heavyweight material. And I would argue his 2x6s may not be able to handle all of that added load from another layer of sheathing and another roof.
When
we
people
need
do
some
that,
engineering.
when they add on to it, I watched that happen in my neighborhood. They just went over it with a new roof, went over the old roof. You don't have to call an engineer, structural engineer in to get that signed off on when you do that?
Are you talking just shingling? They
No,
shingled
no, no.
over
Like
the old
building.
shingles?
In this case, yes, but what the reader's talking about, like when you're adding a whole new roof on top of an old roof, like does a structural engineer need to get involved with that?
Yeah, we have one project similar to that in design, and we are working with a structural engineer to figure out the best way to do it. Um, did they actually frame a new roof over the top of the old roof, and that's why they left the shingles there?
You mean in the case of what I was
Yeah,
describing? No, no, they did not. I'm just remembering thinking
They just put
about
shingles over old shingles.
essentially, yeah. And it's just I just remember thinking re-roofing is, yeah, laying over an old roof. Like the point that you made that strikes me is just not knowing if you have got leaks or some kind of, something that should get taken care of before you lay a new roof on. Spend all that money, you might have a problem that you can't see, right?
yeah.
I think that's the best reason to tear it all off there. Although, code allows you to have 2 layers and,
So somewhere right now, Mike Gerton is shaking his fist at his radio, probably telling us that we've got to talk about the manufacturer's specifications for the asphalt shingle, and I don't believe all of them are spec'd for over roofs.
I'm sure that's true. And I got to believe if you want to add several inches of foam insulation to your house's roof, that the building inspection process is going to be part of your life. But I don't know that necessarily.
And some very expensive long screws.
Screws are expensive.
Especially the ones that you can use for doing over roofs through the...
That are 6 or 8 inches long.
Yeah, they would have to be, yeah.
As far as using recycled rigid insulation, I think it's a fantastic idea. I've done it myself. InsulationDepot.com. I hope they're still in business. They'll help you get what you need, and comes on a big box truck, and it's fantastic and saves a lot of carbon. Kind of dirty and hard to store, but it is a third of the price of new material.
If you're laying 2 to 3, 4 inches of rigid foam on top of your existing shingled roof, is a stud finder, I've never used one, but like you're trying to screw into your rafters, right? So does that get trickier?
Maddeningly difficult.
It seems like it would be awful. So there's another good reason to tear off the existing shingles, right?
I can still in my mind see Robert, who worked with us at Hudson Valley Preservation, just missing the timber frame studs while putting Gutex on the side of this building, and just like him getting to that point where it should hit or it's not going to hit, and wham, not hit, and then just another one, not hit.
8 hours of that can make a person insane, right? I would imagine.
They're so hard to pull out, and they're like $2 a screw. So you kind of feel like you should be putting in the effort to pull them out.
Everyone who I've ever heard say they've done that work says it is surprisingly difficult to hit a 1.5 inch wide framing member through several inches of foam. And it makes perfect sense, because if it's off even a fraction of a degree, by the time you go through that foam layer and the sheathing and the other sheathing layer, it could be inches off at the bottom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're already attacking the screw at an angled surface. You're not, in a natural position of straight down into a floor or perpendicular into a wall.
You mean because of the pitch of the roof?
Yeah. So you're already kind of off in how you're attacking it from your norm.
And when you can't see it, doesn't. Yeah. But just curiosity, does a stud finder work like through all that level of thickness?
It doesn't even work through plaster unless you buy a really, really expensive one. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
It doesn't work with drywall seemingly half the time.
Yeah.
If it's got too much mud on it. Yeah, I agree. You got to just tap it.
It is totally an imperfect technology. The most reliable way I've found is to take off a wall plate for a receptacle and find out which side of the box this is the stud is on, and then try and figure out the layout from there.
cross your fingers that
That's
it's on
smart.
a layout.
All right. It's not always, yeah.
And that your receptacle isn't on like a stack of 4 2x4s nailed to the end of the stud.
Because it often is. Jeff, what's your assessment of the reliability of stud finders?
My experience is pretty minimal or pretty poor. I did recently buy a new one, which seems to work better because it was based on a review you did.
Oh, huh.
I did?
Yeah, when we did a Tool Tech years ago.
What brand did you get?
It was a Franklin.
I should get one of those, clearly.
What? Jeff, I didn't hear you.
Franklin.
Yeah. I
haven't
see
used it
people
much,
use
though.
magnets, and that seems like a great way because it grabs the drywall fastener, the nail, or the screw. And, you know, unless someone is a complete hack, that is certainly in the framing.
Yep. Also won't
they-
work through the foam board.
What's that do?
Also
They don't.
won't work through the foam board.
Right.
It's true. David from YouTube wrote in. He says, AeroBarrier, is this a solution for air sealing? I've heard you mention it, but have heard other quality builders talk about it. So Fine Homebuilding covered the process in an article that I'll put on the podcast page called Is There an Easier Approach to Air Sealing? And answers this very question. It's only for new homes, basically, unless you are completely emptying the house of all its furnishings or masking everything. This stuff goes everywhere, so you just can't have people's stuff in the house. So it's a short answer because it's easy to answer.
That's interesting, though. I just want to throw in, I know we're running out of time, but does it make sense for new construction? I looked at a thread on GBA about this topic. If the house is designed and detailed well, why spend up to 10 grand versus using membranes and tapes? And the argument there that people were making is that it's better for retrofits because if you have the opportunity, because it's expensive, it's toxic, it's kind of
not toxic. I need some evidence.
Okay. It's
why do you say
spray
it's
foam.
toxic?
Well, it's a spray foam, right?
No, it's not.
Okay,
It's
all right,
it's
well,
a
then maybe
water-based sealant.
Okay, all right. It seemed like there was some conversation around it that there are better materials to use for the health of the indoor environment. That you
I have
know
so
about
little
it. You were on
patience with
site,
that. You know what I mean? It's like, why you use it? Because you're not spending all the labor to install air sealing tapes and caulking, right? It's done in hours. I think you could spend tens of hours taping and detailing a house with more conventional methods. So I think that's the answer. And it's not cheap by any measure, but neither is labor.
Right, that's what I was wondering.
On the topic of toxicity, I've been working inside a house where they have used that same product to seal ductwork, which is where that whole system came from. And I was coughing garbage up for days and days of being around it, even though the installers who were totally maskless were like, it's fine. We breathed it in.
Were you in there while they were doing it?
Yes, and they had a couple of leaks.
I think that's different than living with it. You're not supposed to be in there. Yeah. No one is supposed to be in there.
Yeah, but do you want to be supporting materials that do that? I mean,
well, I wouldn't be in a room full of paint fumes either. Solvent-based coatings, but they're once they're in place, they're not a risk.
Sure, but do we want to be supporting materials whereby that's what's required of people to be exposed to these toxic products day in, day out? That's a bigger question.
I can tell you Ross McPherson was never around the stuff. When he did go in there, he wore a full-face respirator to adjust the spray heads at one point during the operation. But he was protected, and
that's my question.
I don't think that's an answer personally, but I'm sure some folks.
The ductwork application of it is a little bit different, and we were told that it wouldn't be leaking out of the registers, but they had a few blowouts from overpressurizing, I believe, was why our house got filled with it while we were working.
One argument that I thought was interesting that somebody made in favor of it is that it's targeted, or I don't know if it was in favor, but it was a point made that it was targeted to builders as an easy and very
Reliable
air sealing strategy. And if you're working with a workforce that doesn't have the skill set to be building, double stud walls with, there's an argument to be made that anyway, that it has that sort of function. It's quick, it's fast, it's easy. That's it. That's what that seems to be.
I can see it being beneficial for interior gut remodels where you're not going to do anything to the exterior of the house. Mm-hmm. That's where I can really see some benefit for it.
Mm-hmm. If the house it would have to be reasonably airtight to start with, though, because like if you have giant thermal bypasses, it will not work. It's it won't seal gaps greater than 5/8 of an inch. Well, I'm sorry?
I've talked to a couple people in Vermont who use it to seal old timber frames as part of the weatherization industry, and they're pretty confident in it working rather well. And you're not going to achieve passive house standards, but you might make a 1700s house in Vermont a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Well, as always, I would welcome folks who listen to the show to weigh in on this subject. Let's keep it science-based. It seems like people have a very knee-jerk reaction to new technologies as always being, suspect. I don't see that.
How old is that product, Patrick?
At least 10 years. And I'm referring to the duct sealing process. I think AeroBarrier is newer. Ross McPherson's article described him being one of the early adopters to do this. So, and I want to say that was maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When I took my net zero building class at Yestermorrow, John Unger Murphy, one of the instructors, was also an early adopter. And I took this class and it might have been 17 or 18, and he had been doing it for quite a few years already.
Mm. It's, I can tell you that I think they got a grant of investments of $21 million to grow this company because, investors think that there's so much opportunity with improving the performance of housing. And this is a promising way to do it. At least people with lots of money think it is. This comes from Marc. We're going to have to make this quick. Hey, folks, I've been listening to your podcast for a little over a year now. I love it. It seems like anytime insulation comes up, there's a major effort to discourage the use of spray foam insulation, but it is never clear why you folks think of it as the last solution if nothing else will work. Unless I missed that podcast, it seems like a fast way to insulate and create a vapor barrier at the same time. Is it because it covers up everything in walls, electric, plumbing, and more, making it difficult for future renovations? I see it used on many home improvement TV shows all the time. This Old House, Homes on Homes, Homes on Homes, Homes on Holes.
Not touching that one.
We say not to use it because it's got tons of carbon, right? The global warming potential is off the charts compared to other insulating products. And it does work well, and it's expensive, but it does work well for what it does, which is why we say to use it when you don't have any choice.
There's also the fact that when it goes bad or when it goes wrong, the installation is not done correctly. It's a nightmare and it's expensive.
Yep.
There's that.
Hard and expensive to fix.
There's a post, at least one post, there's probably multiple posts on GBA about the potential for lingering odor. It does have an impact on indoor air quality. Maybe not, AeroBarrier may not, but there's data to support the idea that this does. So people who are sensitive are aware that, that's not a good product for them. But mostly, I think that's the number one reason, right? That we say we discourage it in general.
Especially when cellulose is like taking garbage and putting it to good use, which is why I like it, right? It's hard to argue with that.
Yeah.
Blew a whole pallet of cellulose into my garage attic.
Oh, that's fun.
I'm curious
Not
what's going to
really.
happen when we no longer have newspapers.
Right.
What the heck? Where are we
Yeah.
going to get the feedstock for cellulose insulation?
Yeah.
Old Taunton
Shit.
magazines.
I love that.
You heard it here, folks. Send your 20-year collection of fine home building and fine woodworking.
We do have an entire office building full of books too. There's that.
Oh my God! Do you think we can support the cellulose insulation industry for a period?
It's funny.
That's
think
hilarious. Anything else, folks?
I think we got to end on that one.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Ian, Kylie, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please, 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 folks, you haven't put a review on the Apple Podcast platform for months, and it really helps us out. So please do that if you haven't. Tell your friends too. Thanks very much for listening. Happy building. Keep craft alive.